What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Digital Art with Jesus Conde, and today we're going to be painting a flower. It's a yellow flower, and I already did the drawing or sketch, as you want to call it, and now we're going to go ahead and paint it. All the stages that we're going to take on: base color, cast shadow, highlights, bounce lights, backlights, and the final details. Alright, so let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is trying to transfer this sketch to a more solid line so we can paint under it. So I'm just gonna copy that. And if I press Ctrl L, I can change the levels, and then that will give me like a darker values where I want them. And if I put that layer in multiply, I can notice how the gray of the paper is making everything darker. So I'm just gonna change the values a little bit more so that disappears. As you can see, that disappears, maybe making the darker even more dark, and now we can actually paint under that. So I'm just gonna block that layer because I don't want to mess it up, and I'm gonna create a new one under it, and I'm gonna go ahead with the yellow color, just a general color under the line art layer. All over it. You don't have to be careful with it. Just make it even, or even if it's not even, you can leave some parts darker than others. Some parts are actually going to be a little bit green, so you want to keep that in mind. The idea for making it even was to use later a clipping mask, but we don't want to do that right now. So what we want to do is to have different yellow tones, but right now I'm just gonna go ahead and find a green. It doesn't have to be that saturated. A little more desaturated green. We're gonna put it on the edges. And you can see I already have some cast shadow on the drawing. It's not that specific, but it helps later on the next steps. Just a little green to have has a color variation for it, so not everything is pure yellow. Something like that, maybe a little bit here too. And as we go, like on the top of the flower, you can use a little bit of more of a pale color. That's what I'm getting from the reference that I'm looking at. You guys are not looking at it, but yeah, it's a little bit more pale color on the top, so we can have that color variation. So remember, just make your drawing and then adjusting the layers You can then go and adjust it with the levels, and that will be it for the base colors. Maybe a little bit of darker green. Because in the next steps on the cast shadow, for example, we're gonna use a little bit of orange on those shadows and to give more volume. So I don't want to use colors that are too dark because it's gonna mess up the process, and I want you guys to look all of it. Alright, so for the next step, I'm just gonna copy this, but you cannot copy like you will copy a normal layers, because then what will happen is that you will be collapsing the layer that is on top, which is multiply, and if it blends with the one on the back, it's gonna look all white. Let me show you how that looks. It will happen like this or like this. So it's not gonna look fine. So I'm just gonna select everything, and if you press Ctrl+Shift+C, then you copy all the layers collapse. If you Ctrl+V and paste it, there you go. You have a new copy with everything merged. And now we can go and cast shadow, put some cast shadows on it. So for the cast shadows, I'm gonna use a more of a orange kind of color, and I already have some cast shadows on. In this case, the light is actually coming from the back. It's kind of like coming from the back like that. That's why I have this shadow drawn here like this. And you also have some dark colors. All of this should be slightly more darker because of that. Alright, so let's use that orangey color, kind of, and we're gonna try things out. Let's put this one here. Something like that, maybe more saturated, even more reddish, kind of like this. Those are the colors that like the dark values that I'm looking on the reference. So, but the light is definitely coming from that part, from that side, the source light. The thing is that because the flower is so like thin, the light is coming through. Light is coming through on the I don't know how to call it, the petals, and everything is still look lighter. Even that is in shadow, everything still looks really fairly light. So, but I do want to darken all this part a bit. Something like that. And the inside here, you can see already I had some like reddish pencil that I used when I was doing the drawing, so I got these little red spots that give some color variation to it also. And we wanna do some of the dark green color. Let's put some dark greens. That's maybe too light, more darker. A little bit in here, and this big shadow coming from behind, like this. Well, it's not like coming from behind, it's being cast by the flower itself, but you understand. All this will be a little bit darker too. And we will have these dark places here. This one, it's completely dark on the reference. Actually, this one was green, so let me paint that again, or at least give the illusion that it's green. It's kind of. And then we have some dark areas here also. There's no way to mess things up with reference, actually. Just gotta be really patient with it, trying to understand it. I almost never used reference before, and that was a huge mistake, especially when learning. So now I have had to go back to it. Like, I didn't use reference the way it should be used. Right, so I think I have a fair, yeah, like a good amount of shadows on it, and I think I'll jump to the next step. Something like a little bit darker here. Yeah, I mean, there's no really way to go wrong with the shadows and everything when using reference, because you just copied it. Problem is when you have to figure out the shadows on your own if you're drawing something from your mind, but then that's when it doesn't look that good, because it's really hard to capture all these details on the shadows and everything just with your mind. It's pretty difficult. That's why sometimes I love to use 3D, because it will figure that out for you automatically. You don't have to. The only effort that you have to do is to put the objects in place and model it, but everything else comes almost for free, like the lighting and bounce light and everything. Even sometimes the composition, because you just play a camera and that's it. Alright, so let me just copy all this, jump to the next step. Highlights. Alright, so for the highlights, let's put some white there, really pale, a little bit of yellow on there. On the live stream, someone is telling me to draw a bee. It's Reynaldo. Reynaldo Quintero, but this is not supposed to be a live stream, it's more like a tutorial that I'm recording, so I'm not going to do that. I already broke the fourth wall by talking to the Instagram audience. Alright, so for highlights, let's let's put some whites with yellow on the top. And yeah, I also need some greenish yellow for the parts on the bottom. Something like this. No, maybe that's too light. Maybe more yellowish, kind of like this. And also this side, we're getting a really hard light here. I forgot to change to flip the canvas. Normally I do that a lot, so it doesn't look weird at the end. Let's do that right now. So you're gonna look at the text on top is gonna be all flipped. We need some accents here. And also there's like a little highlight on the edges of everything. Seems like that's something normally you don't do. You were doing this by memory. Definitely that's something I wouldn't do. If I was doing this by memory, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't think about that. Alright, so we also need some really tiny highlights in here. Something like that, and then a little bit here. And here. So basically the light is coming this side, like from the top, so you're getting all these highlights. On the petals are like on the bottom, but are looking up, like the petals are looking up that way. And here what's going on is that you're receiving like this highlight here, but because of the shape of the flower there, you're getting this part in shadow, and it's weird because it's casting like a shadow on its own petal that is curved. Just because it's this curved, it's casting a shadow on its own. So that's a really interesting detail that you wouldn't think about if you were doing this by memory. Alright, I think this is enough information to continue to the next step, where we're going to do the bounce lights. It's not gonna be much, I think. It's already pretty light values, so if I put some bounce light on it, it's gonna look way too light. But we have some places that we can add something. So basically bounce lights. If a light hits here, it will bounce this way. And I'm gonna use kind of like an orangey color just to give more life to it, but it should actually be like yellowish. So the place that you will notice that more are the shadows, because those spots are darker, and it will make everything just more lighter. Maybe more orange looking color, and more like this. The places where are shadows and light is like bouncing on it and going everywhere. Like basically the light is coming here and doing this, like bouncing this way lots of times. So you get those accents of light on those areas, and it will look like super colorful. Also here. It could be said that at some point this looks a lot like surface scattering, but it's actually bounce light, and the surface scattering is already kind of happening just because I'm painting everything from the reference. I'm kind of like copying the surface scattering effect already, so we're not going to see too much of that later. We do need a little bit of bounce light here just to have that information there. And we also need some greenish bounce light, but again it will look kind of like surface scattering. That's way too green. Let's make it more yellowish, and it's way too saturated too. Alright, so let's just copy this again, and let's go with backlight and surface scattering. And as I said, we already have some of that because of what we're doing, but just because we're gonna make everything, let's make everything slightly darker, just a tiny bit. Let's erase this grayish background. Just select it with the magic wand, and let's put some really light colors there. But more like saturated light colors. If you should do it with white, it won't look good. And I'm just going to concentrate the backlights like this. Something like that. Maybe on this edge a little. Also like in here. Kind of like that, yes. And let's see. I think that's enough for the backlights. We already have some kind of super scattering effect with everything that we did before. Let's just put some color variations to hint that. Or maybe in these big ones. Some really bright colors. Alright, so now we're going to do, we already did all the steps, starting from the drawing, then the base colors, then casting shadows, then the highlights, bounce and reflections, super scattering, and now we're going to go for the final details of it. Normally when I'm going to do the final details, I like to do a little bit of color correction. So I'm gonna go with levels, open the level tab, and I'm going to change some things a bit to see what happens. Here's a more reddish result. Like that. Changing the blues a bit. Now I'm going to select all this part and erase it. So what we're going to do now is the final detail pass, and I'm going to do again, I'm going to do everything just a tiny bit darker so I can really hint those highlights. Let's go ahead. We're gonna zoom in a little, because when doing details we have to do that. But let's flip the image, because I already worked all the image looking to one side. Here it is. Let's flip it. And let's go darker on some areas with red. And let's put some darker values in there. I'm going to use 40 or 30% opacity, so I have more range when blending. That's basically forcing me to do everything slower, and I can take like better decisions when painting, when doing the values, I mean. Yes, when I use like lower opacity, that's because I'm like really thinking about how, like, the transitions from dark to light and all the stuff. Also, you wanna have like illusion of detail. You don't have to really make it that detailed. And at this point I'm not looking too much at the reference anymore. I have it there in the background, but it's not like copying it constantly, because I already made this different enough to be mine and not just something that I draw from reference. That always happens when you draw something. Well, at least to me. So let's make all this part darker too. Maybe less opacity. Let's work with like 30% opacity. At some point I changed it and I didn't even notice that I changed it to like 80. 100% again, because I want to do this little dark spot there and here. And you can see I still pretty much have some of the pencil drawing on the background. So it's not that bad if you leave it there. I mean, it looks like it looks more artistically, I guess that's the word. And we want to also go further with those highlights. Let's make this highlight a little bit tiny. Let's look in from far away to see what it looks like. All right. Yeah, let's put those really bright highlights, because that's why I make everything darker when we went to the final detail part, because I wanna really put some bright highlights in there. It's the only way to do it, because you already have like bright things from the, how do you call that, the specular highlights step. You wanna go even more brighter. You either put something like a darker layer on top of everything, or you just darken things up a little. Something like that. Let's flip it again. We don't get used to that. And if I look it from far away, I will say I need darker areas in this side. So let's do that. Let's put some dark in here, something like that. I think that's fine. And I'm doing this like really soft shadow part with 30%, 35% opacity. So that's not damaging my image at all. It's just like if I was doing something really soft on top, almost like with an airbrush. But you have to be careful though. Like this, and adding some dark parts in there. Let's put some dark in here. And I want to go even darker, but I'm not sure that it's going to look good. Let's just try things out. Right, so I think I need more yellow on it. Let's put some bright yellows on there. It's supposed to be a yellow flower. And this is gonna look, yeah, this is gonna look more like a subsurface scattering kind of thing. Like if the light was coming through the petals. also here, and let's put a little bit in here too. Maybe lighter. I seem to be missing something on the sides with those other petals that are kind of like even all or more like a leaf, because it's really green on the reference. I'm actually making it less green and more like yellow, but they're there and it's looking like super green. Something like that, yes. And let's put some, let's make these greens lighter. I also think I need some, change the shape a bit, looks weird. And now let's go with a really dark red. I'm avoiding to use black at all. I'm not using any black other than the pencil of the first sketch. Yeah, something like that. We also need like a shadow from the petals and things inside, so let's draw one here. That's something that happens a lot when you're doing like really tiny stuff. There's shadows and things are so complex, like it's really hard to understand sometimes what's happening. But you basically have shadows going through the things that are on front because they are so thin that you can actually see the shadow like going through it or projecting itself on the outside, and you can see it from the other side. So that's cool. What else can we do to this thing? I think that's enough actually. If I do more to it, maybe it will start to look bad. So I just want to stop. Maybe this shadow should be more like with more of a shape because of the actual shape of the leaf. Yeah, I think this is it. Let's put some white on it. The white will be like really, really bright spots where no longer was enough to use the brightest yellow, but it needed some white to work. Let's use a really bright yellow to draw these really tiny petals here. I think that's it. Alright guys, thank you very much for joining the live stream and the YouTube video when this is up. And now you guys know the process of how to paint a flower. I'm gonna try to upload the drawing somewhere so you guys can download it and maybe try that out if you want to try paint on top of the same drawing that I did. I don't know if that would be helpful or hurtful for you because the cool thing will be that you guys do your own drawing for it. But sometimes people just wanna learn how to paint first somehow and then to draw. But yeah, that's basically it. Let's put some orangey color in there to make it more life, give more life to it. And this was all the process. We started with the line art sketch, and then we did the base color and variations, cast shadow and volume to give like the rounded aspect to it. Then the specular and highlights, then doing like bounce lights and reflections, although this wasn't too much because of I was drawing it with reference. So what happens is that some of that information is already in there because of the colors that I was using. Backlights and surface scattering, and then like the final with details and everything, putting everything together. But we already had like a really good base with what we started with, so it actually makes things really easy when you're doing this like systematically, a step-by-step process. So that's it guys, thank you very much and see you next time. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't. Please, on the left I have all my links and the Instagram page, the Twitter, and the Share Your Art group. And I wanted to share other things like channels from people that I know, especially Easy Sosa has a really cool channel about digital painting, and Itar Magazine channel too. Thank you very much. See you next time.